The 2023 election may be over, but many analysts and groups are still looking into the electoral process. While the concluded election had a large turnout of voters, some individuals have been arrested for causing violence and trying to rig the process. With the United States of America and Nigeria sharing bilateral relations, with the former being one of the relocation destinations for many Nigerians, the U.S. government has imposed visa restrictions on the individuals who undermined the democratic process during Nigeria's 2023 election. Although some Nigerians have asked the U.S. government to reveal names, the United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, in a tweet, simply reiterated America's commitment to strengthening Nigeria's democracy and the rule of law. Well, joining us in the studio is lawyer, public affairs analyst Fred Nzako. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good to be with you.
Welcome. Right. And via Zoom is public affairs analyst Abraham Great. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having me once again.
Good morning.
Now, the U.S. has imposed visa restrictions, and this has generated a mixed bag of reactions. I wonder what it is for you, because the U.S. says it is doing this to help strengthen our democracy. And the question for some persons is, do we need external persons to help us strengthen our democracy? Isn't that for us to do as a country?
Thank you. For me, it is very important to look at the timing of this. I wouldn't know why America choose to react at this point in terms of the fact that the current election in Nigeria has petitions in court. There is a judicial process. And I know that America is very strong on upholding the rule of law. Now, because there is no verdict or determinations on the actual election, I don't know, maybe America is doing this as a deterrent even to the judicial personnel themselves or to create a scare. The other thing to look about this is that America is actually not in the best of position right now to be able to impose bans on people, because American election, since 2000, I think from the election that brought in George Bush II with Al Gore, you see that there have been issues, there have been discrepancies, there have been anomalies. In 2016, you saw the intervention of foreign countries or companies like, the Cambridge Analytica and stuff like that in American election. The last election was seriously contested. There were some suppressions and stuff like that. So I don't know if America is in the best place around the world right now to flex that kind of muscle on a nation like Nigeria. And definitely, we're going to see some, relationship in terms of diplomacy. There may be some relationship strain with this action.
Abraham, let me come to you on this. The point there is, as it is right now, Nigerians are feeling that when friends or allies of Nigeria are assisting to entrench and strengthen the democracy we have, that we should be working internally to complement that. Some said that this imposition of a ban on visa for Nigerians who are presumed to have committed electoral fraud or infraction should be a wake-up call to Nigeria to look inwardly and see how they can put its house or put her house in order. What do you say to this?
Well, America is very strong on its foreign policies, and America is also very strong on its internal policy. But in recent time, we have seen the failings and the trials of the American democracy in itself and the failings of democracy around the world. What I'm particular about is process. In terms of the rule of law, there is nobody, as my colleague in the studio has said, that has been indicted. There's nobody that has been charged to court to have committed any electoral malpractice. And the jurisprudence of America does not have the final say on what happened in Nigeria. It is quite conspicuous that there are anomalies and stuff like that. But when you look at on the legal process, in law, there's something we call the doctrine of substantial evidence or or so. I mean, what is the proportion? We have 176,000 polling units. What is the proportion of the anomalies in what percentage of the country? Now, I'm here in Canada. I wasn't there at the election. So my view, I'm only having a balcony view of the, and I'm not trying to play down the situation, but I am more particular about process, because every act has its reciprocity. Nigeria, in some way, will have to begin to show the world in terms of its own foreign policy. How many, if, for example, Nigeria choose to also place a ban based on what happened in America in January 6th, we can begin to be a strong nation. There are things, in Arizona, Kari Lake is probably still in court that is challenging the result and how that election was carried out. A lot of it was shown on public TV, how ballots were dealt with and stuff like that. So in terms of the reciprocal effect, diplomatic effect, the world is wisening up. The timing for me remain a question. But America is a big country. You can't question them. They put a lot of process before they make decision. So there may be more to meet the eye. But I'd like to also deal on something that was said in the studio. I enjoy the conversation and the energy in the studio. But I'd like to remind us that it will be near impossible for foreign countries or foreign organizations to be able to donate any form of money to INEC or to our electoral process, because that will be breaching the electoral law. And finally, you see, when you look at section 126, from what my colleague was saying from 121, I think the deterrent and the consequence of electoral malpractice in Nigeria, 500,000 for offenders or go to jail for 6 months, the consequence of election malpractices in Nigeria is not strong enough.
Bring Abraham here, who's joining us from Canada. Well, Abraham, the issue there is, these individuals that the United States has placed ban on giving them visa, what do they really stand to lose? Can you give us an idea, just an ideal idea? Is it just the U.S. Visa they cannot get, or it extends to other countries that they might want to travel to? Give us a sense of that.
That's a very interesting question. But if I can quickly weigh in on the Adamawa situation, I tend to naturally not look at issues, particularly in Nigeria, on the face value. It is very, very important to look deeper into that election. I'm personally convinced that it is not a straitjacket results that was announced, and that the reg was completely out of order to have announced what he announced. But I'm not convinced that if a woman, in a state, in a northern state, come that close to having a runoff, to also the runoff itself, she's coming that close. What role does suppression play in that election? Perhaps there is something that the rec knows that we do not know that make him to act that improper way. I'm not convinced that that election was won directly, if it was not the fact that the ruling party actually have a case in court that could have, that their interventions and stuff could have seriously impacted that. Maybe there would have been more forces. I think that woman, particularly when you look at the fact that a lot of Christians in the country were campaigning for her, a Muslim woman, and they vote unanimously for her. That election, if I was right there in Nigeria, I would probably be taking that up to probe that election, but it's gone now. Now, the question that you ask in terms of what are the effects, now, every country now thinks independently. In the past, whatever America does, during the time of Tony Blair and George Bush, whatever America does, you see UK will follow suit. But it's no longer the case. Every country now takes their own decision. However, what are the restrictions? I want you to understand that when these travel bans are placed, they are placed on people for non-immigrant visas. So visitors visa, student visa, excursion and stuff like that, they cannot. This ban does not mean, for example, if these individuals have children who file in an immigrant visa for them, because that will mean that they can then petition, at the court of law to say, you have restricted my dad or my mom or my sister or my brother, I'm going to court to have that injunction removed. So please understand that these things, they're not fickle, they're serious, but there are ways around that. And American immigration is extremely, very difficult, very tough, and they know what they are doing. But a visa ban is not a final route for that person to get into America. But there could also be a ripple effect where other countries begin to now follow suit and say, okay, we want to also impose this ban. But I want you to understand this. A lot of the people that are at the Electoral Commission are from some part of the country that don't really care about traveling abroad. And when you look at how bad election practices are, and if true, some of the inducement that these people have, if it's true, sometimes we'll read on Twitter that somebody has been paid, $200 million, $220 million. I don't think those figures are correct, or even if I told you people have been paid, I don't believe. But let's just assume if it is correct. Do you think that somebody will bother about going to America if they have that kind of money in their purview and stuff like that? So I think what we need to focus more is the sacrosancy of our own electoral process, our judicial process, our trust to one another. And our system needs to work. We don't need to wait for external bodies to impose sanction on us. Now, here is the thing. There are parties in Nigeria who goes to this country sometimes to lobby that other people will be banned. This last election, I mean, as a legal person myself, I have seen preponderous evidence to suggest that every major party, particularly the three major parties, were involved in rigging. APC, PDP, Labour, they were all. There are sections of the country that their suppressions were more than the rest, every one of them. Now, if a specific party have been handpicked for the ban, that would be unfair, because across all the major parties, there were some anomalies.
Let me bring the question to you now, Abraham Great. The implication of this, if we are not strengthening our processes on our democracy.
Well, we already seen the implication, because who we elect into office determines what we get in governance. And, you cannot have a more effective country more than the brains that you have elected into the system. But these things have to start from the rudiment. There are few other elements. But by the way, I was just enjoying my my big brother Mike and your guest in the office. I love those analogies. It's important that we understand that the establishment of the federal character is meant to bring about equity in the country. It's meant to be able to make Nigeria equitable. But as it is right now, the federal character itself needs to go beyond religion, ethnicity, and stuff like that into the balance between the elite and the people. Governance is still far removed from the people, and that's one of the things. If there's anything that I appreciate about what Labour Party did in this last election, is that Labour Party actually galvanized the people. It was Abraham Lincoln who said that election belongs to the people. Elections, the real thing is we have a circle of people among which power have rotated, and this agitates the Nigerian populace. People are thinking, now when is it going to be my turn? When am I going to be able to play a part? And we've also seen people of great character in our community that are never, if they ever dare for office, they will not make it. It is always the corrupt politicians. It's always the same faces of people that we know that are even things as little as House of Assembly. So we need to get to a point whereby the big parties that are playing this thing has to be intentional in digging deep into the citizenry and begin to pick out people. But there is a system that breeds corruption in Nigeria. And this is a bit of a digression. But do you know that corruption actually starts in Nigeria from when we're in primary schools? This issue of putting people under pressure from primary school of writing exams, and secondary schools where people begin to cheat and begin to have expo for WAEC and stuff like that. Do you know that that is where election malpractice actually starts from? An average person is looking for a way to beat exam, to to have parallel or to get into university, because what it takes to get into university in Nigeria, you realize that we start, a lot of this corruption starts from that realm, because an average Nigerian is struggling to get everything. You are struggling to get into school. You are struggling to get into a community. You are struggling to get noticed by your family. Everything is a struggle in Nigeria. If we can begin to solve some of this struggle problem and people are at ease, the tension in the country can lie down a little bit. Everywhere I go, I always quote Maslow's hierarchy of need. Maslow says that the first need of human being is the physiological need, the food to eat, the water to breathe. As long as people don't have this thing, you can always incite them to violence or to go and commit crime.
All right.
Right, let's leave the conversation here. Gentlemen, we must thank you, as analyst Abraham Great, for your time as well.
Many thanks.
Thank you
very much.